Tell us about your time there. What kind of stuff did you see and what did you experience over there?
Yeah, everybody's experiences can be, kind of varied. Um, but and I've had this conversation with other folks before. I think that there's this idea that when you go to a place like Afghanistan, if you've never been, that it's just like, a country, full of, goat herders and, very tribalistic and not very educated, and in pretty much doom and gloom, right?
Right.
But what's kind of interesting about places like Afghanistan, and other places that I've been to when I was in the service was you had kind of a mixture of a lot of different cultures, right? You definitely had, very much a tribal culture still, and very agriculture based and things of that nature, and very, into the family. But you had highly educated, people who had left Afghanistan, who had received higher education elsewhere, who were very involved in government, who, were definitely kind of moving at a different pace than, say, other parts of Afghanistan. So for those of us that had been there, I spent a lot of time working with partners in other DoD branches, and then in other, three-letter agencies, and you had to work with, the local Afghans.
Right.
And so you definitely, when you've had to do deployments like that, it's almost as if you kind of bond with that culture a little bit, right? You kind of get an insight into what these people are trying to fight for. Now, were they ever going to get to where they needed to be? I think that that's questionable. I think, that's an argument that you could, that we'll be having probably into my kids' adult life, about whether it's any part of the Middle East or even, like, sections of Africa that I spent time in. But they were definitely trying to get to that area. And so, but you saw a lot of corruption too. I mean, I saw a lot of that as a resource manager, a lot of waste and fraud, and kind of missions that didn't really go anywhere really, because of, bad info, or info that's just kind of being passed around, just to kind of keep busy.
Yeah, our
Um,
government isn't the only one that has that kind of
yeah,
behaves that way.
exactly. Yeah, that's not like a uniquely American trait.
Yeah,
So
bureaucracy.
yeah, definitely. And then you have, like my husband had a very different experience than I did. He worked at, in fact, when the withdrawal happened and the prison got overrun by the
Mhm.
Taliban, and all of these, Al Qaeda and terrorists were released, my husband had actually worked at that detention facility.
Wow.
Yeah, and had sustained injuries during a, like a, what do you call, a riot
Mhm.
that had happened when he was there. And he was so upset when when we were watching this, and when he heard that, and he said, I used my own body to protect enemy prisoners of war
Yeah.
from harm, because it was the right thing to do, because this is, because we're American soldiers and this is what we do, and I did my job to keep them safe, but to also make sure that they get held accountable for nothing. He said none of that mattered. None of all the nightmares that he's had to live with, and all of that from that experience, is for nothing, is how it felt for him. And so, he had a very different experience than I did in Afghanistan. But, that's just one of those things that I don't think that, politicians or even like military brass really get, about how the damage that the images that we saw a year ago cause the veterans that are out living today.